Have you ever felt like society is just, well, stuck?
Right.
Like we understand the urgent need to build more housing, vital infrastructure, clean energy solutions. But despite all the talk, progress somehow just grinds to a halt.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like we're tangled in endless red tape, right?
Mhm.
Procedural hurdles, and just this sense that we're constantly tripping over our own feet.
It's incredibly frustrating, isn't it? Seeing the ambition, the need for progress kind of blocked by the very systems meant to manage it.
It really is. And that tension you're describing, that friction between wanting to move forward and the complex systems we've built, that's pretty much the core of the book we're diving into today. It's called Abundance, What Progress Takes by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson.
Right. So our mission here is to really unpack the main arguments in abundance. But maybe more importantly, we want to explore the criticisms, the debates that have popped up around it.
Yeah, give you a full picture. Not just what the book says, but how people reacted, where the ideas landed well, and where they maybe caused some friction.
Exactly. A comprehensive critique, basically. Help you understand its stance, its reception, but without giving away, the whole story, so you can still pick it up yourself.
And just a reminder, as you listen, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book critique.
Okay, so let's get into the book's core thesis. The authors, Ezra Klein, you probably know him from the New York Times, and Derek Thompson, who used to be at The Atlantic.
They're both pretty well-known writers.
Their main point is, well, pretty direct. They argue that if America really wants this future of prosperity, of innovation, we simply have to build and invent more of what we need.
Sounds straightforward, almost obvious, doesn't it?
It does. But they argue that progress, especially in really key areas, housing, infrastructure, climate action, has just been massively held back, stymied, as they put it.
Precisely. And they build this case that the stagnation is mostly down to excessive regulation and just this maze of procedures.
They don't really hold back on who they think is responsible either.
No, they point fingers, particularly at what they call liberal strongholds. They talk about things like super restrictive zoning laws, dictating exactly what goes where.
And those environmental reviews that seem to take forever.
Yeah, those two. And just layers and layers of bureaucracy that feel like they're designed to slow things down. The book's full of these anecdotes, these stories about projects just getting stuck.
Painting this picture of a system actively blocking needed development.
Right. And they even draw this pretty stark comparison with the U.S. sort of stagnating while places like China are supposedly building much faster.
Okay, here's where it gets maybe a bit more pointed. Klein and Thompson say America is basically stuck in this political mess.
A quagmire, yeah.
On one side, you've got parts of the left who they say are often wary of growth itself, worried about, environmental or social impacts.
And on the other.
Parts of the right, who they frame as being against almost any kind of government intervention.
So both sides end up reinforcing the problem, in their view.
That's the argument. One side blocks development it sees as bad. The other blocks government action or spending. Net result: gridlock, stasis.
It's a provocative framing of the political landscape.
It is, but what's really interesting is their proposed way out, the abundance agenda.
Ah, yes. The solution part.
They pitch it not as some radical overhaul, but as a pragmatic, growth-focused third way. It's not about ditching all rules.
Or selective.
Exactly. They talk about strategically relaxing some regulatory barriers, but pairing that with targeted government subsidies, smart investment, basically.
And they use historical examples to back this up.
Yeah, like the incredible mobilization during World War II, how America's industry just transformed almost overnight, and more recently, Operation Warp Speed for the vaccines.
Showing how public and private sectors can work together for big goals.
Right. They see those as models, but their argument goes deeper than just efficiency. They suggest there's this big blind spot in how we usually talk about this stuff.
How so?
They argue that focusing only on the potential downsides of building or the fears about growth means we totally overlook the real harm that comes from the scarcity we have right now.
Ah, so the lack of building is the real problem.
That's their point. Think about it. If we don't build enough housing, what happens?
Well, prices go up, homelessness potentially increases.
Exactly. They contend the scarcity directly makes things like the homelessness crisis worse. It drives up poverty by increasing living costs. And it deepens inequality because basic stuff becomes harder to get.
So they're flipping the script, saying inaction, not building, is what's actually hurting vulnerable people the most.
It's a powerful reframe, definitely makes you think. Okay, so the book lays out this argument. We need to build. Regulations are stopping us. But how do they build that argument? What kind of claims are they making?
That's a great question. It helps to think about different levels, right? Like
Oh.
what's presented as fact versus what's interpretation versus what's maybe a recommendation.
Okay, so like knowledge versus understanding versus wisdom.
Sort of, yeah. Knowledge is verifiable stuff. Like, it's a fact that housing starts have stagnated. Data shows that. That's knowledge.
Got it.
Understanding is figuring out why, connecting the dots. And wisdom is making judgments, proposing solutions, thinking long term.
So how does abundance fit that?
Well, a lot of its core claims, like abundance requires fewer regulations, are really interpretations. Plausible, maybe central to their argument, sure, but debatable as the only cause or even the main one. It's more like a strongly argued opinion than pure undisputed knowledge.
So the fact of stagnant housing starts is knowledge, but blaming it primarily on zoning. That's the interpretation part.
Exactly, the stagnation is fact. But saying zoning is the number one reason. Lots of experts and studies would push back on that or at least complicate it.
And critics say the book maybe simplifies that.
Yeah, they argue it sometimes brushes past alternative explanations, market failures, how investment capital flows, even class dynamics. It simplifies a really complex problem down to maybe too simple a cause, regulation. Makes for a clear argument, but maybe misses some key parts of the picture.
And what about their attempt to connect everything? Mid-century growth, recent policy, international stuff, their understanding.
They definitely try to build a coherent picture, show systemic connections. That effort to link lessons from different times and places shows they are reaching for that broader understanding.
But when they recommend specific policies...
That's when it tips into wisdom claims.
Yeah.
Saying this specific mix of deregulation and subsidies is the best way forward. That's a judgment call. It's open to challenge based on how you read history or economics or what you value. They argue their path strongly, but it's one version of wisdom, not the only one.
Which brings us to ethics, right? The golden rule idea. If we propose solutions, how do we make sure they work for everyone, especially the vulnerable?
Right. The book often frames regulatory slowdowns as mainly hurting the marginalized people locked out of housing or waiting for new medicines. That's a really important point.
But there's a flip side.
Critics argue there is. They say the book doesn't focus enough on how deregulation itself could also harm vulnerable groups.
Can you give an example? It feels like a real tension there.
Sure. Think about environmental justice communities. If you relax industrial regulations quickly, who lives near those plants? Often it's lower-income communities or communities of color, or renters. If tenant protections get weakened in the rush to build, they could lose stability.
And the book doesn't really dig into those specific impacts.
Critics say not enough. It doesn't spend much time on, say, what life is like for someone living next to a newly deregulated factory or a huge housing project built without robust community input. So questions arise about that ethical balance. Would the burdens of abundance fall evenly?
Okay, stepping back even further, how do these ideas mesh with bigger civic goals, like the Preamble to the Constitution Union, justice, tranquility, welfare, liberty?
Interesting lens. Well, by tackling national stagnation, the book is sort of aiming for a more dynamic, maybe a more perfect union in a broad sense. But it doesn't focus much on the cultural or democratic glue that holds a society together.
And justice.
On the surface, removing barriers for the disadvantaged sounds like promoting justice. But, as critics point out, if deregulation accidentally harms vulnerable groups, more pollution, displacement, it could actually deepen injustice.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
What about domestic tranquility or general welfare?
The book kind of implies less scarcity means less conflict, so easier tranquility. Critics find that a bit simplistic. Common defense isn't really its focus. But general welfare, yeah, that's central. More housing, more innovation that's explicitly aimed at boosting general welfare, material well-being.
Then liberty.
Big emphasis on removing restrictions, which fits a certain view of liberty, the freedom to build, to innovate. But again, it depends. Weakening protections could also weaken the liberty or security of those negatively affected. It leans heavily on one side of that liberty scale.
Okay, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the book's logic, let's just pause for a second. We really believe in sparking rational thought, getting deeper insights. That's why we often create these things called mindful moments.
Yeah, they're shorter pieces, really focused discussions designed to help you think critically. They use the same kind of AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques you're hearing now.
You can find them, plus more in-depth stuff, on our YouTube channel. It's a good spot to keep exploring complex ideas critically.
Definitely worth checking out. So, Okay, logical analysis of abundance. Strengths first. It's definitely strong in laying out the costs of being stuck.
Yeah, it makes a clear case for why inaction is bad.
Very clear. It highlights the real-world harms of not building things effectively. You can't argue with that part easily.
So, strong on the problem statement.
Mm.
Where do the logical weaknesses show up, according to critics?
This is where a lot of the debate happens. Critics argue the book sometimes mixes up correlation and causation. Just because progress is stalled, while regulations exist, correlation doesn't automatically prove regulations are the main cause. Causation.
It might oversimplify the why.
Potentially.
Hmm.
There's a tendency to sort of glide past other potential reasons for, say, high housing costs. Critics say it downplays things like market failures, how investment works, maybe even class power shaping what gets built where. It offers a strong, simple story, but maybe too simple for the full reality.
Are there specific logical hiccups people point to, like fallacies?
Sometimes critics see a bit of a straw man argument against liberal ideas, simplifying complex views to make them easier to knock down, like painting all environmental concerns as just anti-building, when it's often about how and where.
Right, ignoring the nuance.
Yeah, and maybe overlooking how complex regulations came to be and all the non-regulatory reasons scarcity might exist. Policy is messy, rarely just regulation bad, deregulation good. The book sometimes leans into that binary a bit heavily.
That makes sense. Okay, let's shift to the bigger picture, the wisdom assessment. What are the potential long-term consequences, the risks of going all in on this abundance agenda?
Well, the potential upside is clear, and it's appealing. If it worked as intended, more growth, more innovation could genuinely lift material well-being for lots of people. More affordable housing, clean energy, new medicines. That's a pretty good future.
A powerful vision, for sure. But with big changes come big potential downsides, right? What are the risks critics highlight?
Absolutely. And critics argue the book doesn't grapple fully with these risks. One big one is potentially reinforcing corporate power. If deregulation mainly helps big companies or the wealthy, it could actually worsen inequality, not fix it.
And environmental risks.
That's another huge one. If you weaken safeguards too much in the name of speed, what about the long-term health of ecosystems? Or public health in communities near new projects? These aren't small things. They involve environmental justice, health trade-offs, and, frankly, the question of whether the private sector can deliver true abundance for everyone without strong oversight. Critics feel the book is a bit light on these crucial issues.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. Find a balanced conclusion. Abundance clearly has some real strengths.
It really does. It's well-written, accessible. It's a call for a liberalism that builds, which is an interesting idea, progressivism focused on material progress. It definitely highlights real, often uncomfortable trade-offs in regulation. It forces a needed conversation, especially on the left, about being automatically anti-development.
But like any big idea, it's got weaknesses, areas where it's open to serious critique.
For sure. Critics would say it's sometimes too simplistic, framing deregulation almost like a magic bullet. It tends to sidestep the complexities of economic power, who really wins and loses from these changes.
And the emissions.
Big ones, according to critics. Not enough on environmental justice or public health impacts, and maybe underestimating the positive role government needs to play beyond just subsidies. Plus, while it argues passionately, it's often short on specific, detailed policy blueprints. More diagnosis than prescription, maybe.
Which leaves us, the listeners, with some big questions still hanging, right? Like, okay, reform might be needed, but which specific rules? And how do you change them without causing new problems?
Exactly. And the huge one. How do you make sure the benefits of abundance are shared fairly? How do you stop them from just flowing to the top, making inequality worse? That justice question is key, and maybe not fully answered by the book's framework.
And finally, that constant balancing act. How do we get the speed and prosperity we want without sacrificing essential environmental or safety protections? It's the ultimate tightrope walk.
Absolutely. Abundance is provocative, readable. It makes a strong case against governmental sclerosis, that feeling of being stuck. It champions material progress through less red tape, more ambition, and it definitely shines a light on real barriers. But, as critics argue, its framework might be missing key pieces regarding government's positive roles in regulation, in ensuring fairness, in protecting the environment. Those missing pieces are pretty critical for any true abundance agenda, one that's equitable and sustainable.
For more insightful analyses like this one, remember to check out Mindful Moments and our podcasts.
And just a note, this comprehensive critique was informed by a systematic framework designed for precise literary evaluation.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book analysis. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.